So the next project we're going to introduce, Crick's Fable, in English, War Primer. War Primer was a book published by Bertolt Brecht in the 50s, in 1955. And it's a book that Adam and I came across and had in our studio for many years and were really in love with. It's not really that well known, but it's really quite unique in that, you know, Brecht spent a lot of time taking newspaper clippings and pairing them up with little poems that he wrote. And the reason he did that is that Brecht, I think a little bit like us, share a concern about images of war. He was concerned that images that you see in newspapers, and in his time that was quite a new thing, images that you see in newspapers are somehow mysterious and in need of decoding, in need of demystifying. He referred to them, pictures like this one, as kind of hieroglyphics. And his solution was to write a poem that somehow explained the image and complicated the image. So I'll read you this poem. I don't know if you can read that, but I'll read it for you. Like one who dreams the road ahead is steep, I know the way fate has prescribed for us, that narrow way towards the precipice. Just follow, I can find it in my sleep. And this is another one, and that's an image. We think that that is Liverpool. That's one of the, is this the bombing of Liverpool? Yeah. A cloud of smoke told us that they were here. They were the sons of fire, not of the light. They came from where? They came out of the darkness. Where did they go? Into eternal night. And so we were really struck by this book, and we wanted to do something with it. I'll read this one. And so we put him up against the wall, a mother's son, a man like we had been, and shot him dead. And then to show you all what came of him, we photographed the scene. They're very beautiful, and they're called quatrains. They follow the basic structure that, you know, forms I think 3 of these, 3.5 quatrains make up a sonnet. Each line is supposed to be 10 syllables long. It's a basic Shakespearean form, and it's intended to be short and direct, and it's really the language of the tombstone in a way. So we took this book and we thought, how can we update this? What would Brecht do now with a book like this? And we began we thought, let's look in the newspapers, let's start cutting out pictures, we even at one point thought about writing our own poetry, which was a disaster. And there's a saying that we found, there's a quote from Brecht, don't start with the good old things, but the bad new ones. And in that spirit, we decided to put our scissors down and our newspapers down and turn to the internet and start to look at what was online, and particularly at moving image, at video clips and screen grabs. And we used his poems almost as a kind of search category. We didn't exactly type his poems into the internet, but we tried to find images that were from the War on Terror that resonated with his poems, and we were really struck by how prescient his imagery was when it was set up against contemporary images. And you know, just to explain, Brecht was concerned with the Second World War with his book, and our book dealt very much with the War on Terror, beginning with the attack of the World Trade Center in New York and ending with the death of Osama bin Laden. And I'll just read this one, which is the same poem as before. The cloud of smoke told us that they were here. They were the sons of God, not of the light. They came from where? They came out of the darkness. Where did they go? Into eternal night.
I think a lot of the kind of meta-narrative of the book is about how conflict is photographed, how that photographic practice has changed since the Second World War and the War on Terror. And this, for example, it was the previous bombing or invasion of Gaza by Israel, and it was purported to be the use of phosphorus bombs in Gaza. But we found this on both pro and anti-Zionist websites. And at the back of the book, we silk screened in the sources of the material, and it's quite important that that was almost our kind of annotation or poems that talked about the kind of new contestation of images in the new way that they're distributed. This again is the famous image of the WikiLeaks showing the mistaken assassination of 3 Reuters journalists by a drone. This is amazing. We first presented this work at Frieze, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and we discovered to our horror just before, the night before that, the day before that, all the Abu Ghraib images are actually licensed by Associated Press. So we phoned up AP more as an experiment and said, look, we're doing an educational talk at Frieze tomorrow, presenting a new project. How much do we owe you to use this image? And they said, well, $100, £100. And we obviously didn't pay, and we owe them probably millions by now. But what we were then asked is, how did you get hold of the license of the Abu Ghraib images made by soldiers on duty? Obviously, they should belong to the American public. And they refused to answer the question. They put us onto the New York desk to refuse to answer the question. And it was actually through a friend who works at AP. And this is really interesting because it talks about kind of not only the new image making, but the new mode of distribution. Is that AP, first of all, have more people watching social media now than they do photographers on the ground. And also, when they spot something like this on a Facebook page, they'll contact the person and say, can we buy your images for $100? And then they then own the license. This comes from a website called www.hownottodressyoukidatHalloween.com. And this again looks like a photograph, but it's actually, every time a combatant is killed by a US soldier, they have to do a biometric portrait of the eye and all the wounds. I'll try and read the poem. And so we put him up against the wall, a mother's son, a man at Weirby, and shot him dead. And then to show you all what came of him, we photographed the scene. This comes from www.unicycle.com, and that's Donald Rumsfeld on a unicycle. I won't go through them all, but a lot of them have become kind of genres in themselves. I think you can recognize this notion of pictures of photographers taking pictures of an event, which is more and more, it's a kind of postmodern thing, but it's almost entered into the public arena. This was in Haiti. And then, of course, the use of kind of the citizen as a witness and the dissemination that they allowed. Again, I mean, this strikes me as like remarkably prescient. So the original picture was a woman on the Spanish beach showing oil on her hands, and the image on the left is also from a Spanish island when a whole lot of immigrants were washed up from a boat that had broken down while they were sunbathing. Women are bathing on the Spanish coast. They climb up from the seashore to the cliffs and often find black oil on arm and breast, the only traces left of sunken ships. And this, you all know, is the remarkably, brilliantly choreographed image that was sent out by Obama to show. It was the single image that was sent out during Operation Neptune, which was the assassination of Osama bin Laden. And it just shows, the inverse tactics of what George Bush embarked on. And a number of people have spoken about George Bush's invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan as in a way, a kind of pursuit for iconic images that would match up to the iconicism of 9/11 and they described 9/11 as an image wound sustained by America. And George Bush's time and time again, his pursuit for, toppling of the statue, announcing victory on the boat, leaking images of Saddam Hussein being hung, and time and time again he failed miserably. And I think Obama obviously is more nuanced, but equally kind of thought through. And this shows a kind of very concerned, very serious administration deliberating a very serious decision. And we do know that because it was described very carefully in the New Yorker article, was that one of the SEALs who were involved in Operation Neptune, they needed to actually identify the body, and they knew that Osama bin Laden was 6'2", is that right? And the Marine, they didn't bring a tape measure with him. And one of the SEALs was 6 foot, so they got him to lie down next to the body of bin Laden, and they took a photograph. And that photograph was never sent out, but we know it exists. And so the last page of our wall primer was just silkscreened a red mark, kind of knowing that at some point this image is going to go out. But also, I think it resonates with the poem. Never forget that men like you got hurt, so you might sit there, not the other lot. And now don't hide your head and don't desert, but learn to learn and try to learn for what?